Greetings, I am Gresham and welcome back to Gresham Reads Monster Blood Tattoo, Book 1, Foundling, by D.M. Cornish. So in Chapter 3 of this intriguing story, we got to see the process in which Rossamund prepares for his new life as a lamplighter. A career choice that he truly does not agree with, but knows apparently he must go with it, or risk losing all chance to be anything more than, well, a mere grunt, I suppose. I believe any that are not chosen are sent to the army. Not the navy either. But Master Frantitot apparently had some leverage and pulled a favor with the owner of a... what was it called again? Let's see. Let's see. Mesius, the tailor, a guardsman for galding, which is apparently protective equipment. Forgive me, the chair's a little creaky today. Not sure why. But either way, Frantitot and Crumpolin had pulled a favor, and as a result, obtained quality gear, quality clothing for Rossamund to travel in, which is good for him. Having people looking out for him is always something to cherish. Of course, the air conditioning turns on now. Sorry about that. If it's audible in the background, then I am sorry. But either way, let us continue on with Chapter 4. But first, the definition. Crumster, a noun. One of the smallest of the armed ironclad river barges, having 3-inch cast iron stakes down each side, and 4 to 12 12-pounder guns upon each broadside. Generally single-masted, though the biggest may have 2 masts. Below the open deck is a single lower deck called the orlop. Forward of amidships, the middle of the craft, is typically hold space for cargo. Aft of amidships, the orlop is reserved for the gustrins and their crews. Gustrins? I wonder what those are. Mr. Sebastian, but I was getting ahead of myself. But either way, let us move on to the actual story itself. This is Chapter 4, On the Hogshead. Mr. Sebastopol was waiting as he said he would be, standing in the fog at the top of the Paterbeck stair. He was wearing his telltale coachman's cloak and black thrice-high. He had his own satchel hanging across his body, together with an oddly ordinary-looking box with a thick strap. Rossamund tried not to stare at the box. Inside it would be the Lear's Sethenicon. He had expected it to be much more unusual, and he was just a little disappointed to see that it was so very plain and ordinary. I'm assuming that is so it can be more easily transported and inconspicuous, but who knows for sure. Sebastopol had been holding a small portable clock or some other such device when Rossamund arrived, and now secreted it away. "You're late, young fellow," he stated flatly. "A lampsman's life is punctuality. 'Twould be best to start forming that habit soon, don't you think?" There was no ire in Mr. Sebastopol's voice, just honest, unself-conscious reproof. Rossamund had never encountered anything like it before. Aye, sir," he puffed and set the valise down. "Well, at least you have come lightly packed. Bravo." The lamplighter's agent pulled out an oblong of sealed paper and another of folded paper. He handed the sealed paper to Rossamund first, saying, "This is my endorsement to our mutual masters." He gave him the folded paper, saying, "These are my instructions to you and to those who will meet you at the other end. Stow the first safely and read the second carefully." The lamplighter's agent folded his arms and stared with his disturbing eyes. "Your first destination is High Vesting, and from there a fortress known as Winstermill. It is a manse, the headquarters of we lamplighters. You will be escorted thither from High Vesting. Your instructions say as much." He squinted. "Hark me now, do not dally on your way, but make directly to Winstermill, where my superiors are awaiting you and others like you to begin your apprenticing. Agreed?" "Aye, sir." Rossamund carefully stowed the precious documents in his buff leather wallet. Mr. Sebastopol took out his little clock again, opened it, and pursed his lips. With a snap of its lid, he declared, "Well, the sooner you start, the sooner away." The leer pointed Rossamund toward steps that went down from the high wall of the canal-side street to the Paterbeck itself. Okay, and we have a sketch of Sebastopol. Interesting. If you wish to see these sketches, you can look up the characters or perhaps purchase the book yourself. So far it is slow but intriguing as we learn of the world. Either way, back to the story. The fog had become almost impossibly thick. Rossamund could barely make out the tottering buildings festering on the other side of the narrow canal, their brooding window lights of red and green showing only faintly. Down there, though you probably cannot see for all this fume, the lamplighter's agent continued with a frown at the muggy air. Down there, along this very pier, you will find a certain river master of Vigilus, waiting to take you aboard his cromster, Rapunzel. The vessel is sound and your way is paid. Rossamund could see nothing but fog in that direction. Aye. Mr. Sebastopol gave a surprisingly warm smile and bowed. Well, lad, the moment of departure has arrived, it seems, so I shall bid you a safe journey and leave. Rossamund was stunned. The lamplighter's agent might not have been the friendliest chap, but such a prodigious journey as that upon which Rossamund was about to embark was surely better done with the Lear's company than without. I thought you'd be coming too, he ventured. Mr. Sebastopol smiled again. I have other tasks to attend to here in Borschenberg. You will see me again someday not too distant, I am sure. Just head down the stair and give 5 berths. A lamplighter's life is independence of thought and deed, my boy. You will need to get used to this as soon as possible. Welcome to the Lamplighters. With that, the Lear bowed again and walked back up to Suningstraat. Mr. Sebastopol waved once from the top of a rise in the street, and with a turn, was gone. Just like that, Rossamund was on his way. Uneasy, he took up his valise and took the stairs down to the river. The fog was still too thick for him to see his destination. He passed by a great post thickly painted white, a berth marker. appearing suddenly out of the gloom, then two more. As the fourth emerged from the soupy morning vapors, he spied a vessel moored there, or the shadow of one at least. As he approached, the outlines of the craft became clearer. It was indeed a cromster, though one in very poor repair, sitting dangerously low in the water. Weren't you supposed to go 5? Let's see. Where is it? Hold on, I thought it said 5, didn't it? Me. Yes, 5 berths, it's right there. So why did he stop at the 4th one? I suppose Rossamund is not the most focused of children. Well, young men at this point. It did not look at all steady or sound to Rossamund. Rather, it looked ready to founder even in the calm of the humor. He frowned. The Foundling had not lived so closeted a life that he had not seen dozens, even hundreds of cromsters plying the mighty river. None of them came close to luxury, but all of them were in far better repair than this tub of rivets. Cromsters, like most other ironclad rivercraft, sat low in the water, with a hole in keel that did not descend too deeply into the murky wash. This was necessary since rivers, even as large a stream as this, were much shallower than any sea, but Rossamund was sure that this one sat just a little too low. If the water lapped near to the gunwale in the calm river, surely would be spilling over it in the great washes when the craft encountered even the smallest swells of even the most sheltered ocean bays. Unless, of course, the ship was not meant to go into the ocean. As he came closer, Rossamund could see that mean, sickly-looking men were wrestling great barrels aboard the craft. "Ahoy!" came a call, and a hefty shadow of a man rolled down the sagging gangplank to the pier. "Who might ye be, lubbering about on the pier in the shadowy morning mists?" Rossamund did not much like being told he was lubbering. It was an unfriendly term seafaring folks used of those who were not. "I'm looking for Rivermaster Vigilus of the cromster Rapunzel," he declared briskly. Not sure if that was the wisest decision, but we shall see what comes of it. The hefty shadow came closer and clarified itself as an unsavory-looking fellow, tall and thickly built, with broad round shoulders and matted eyebrows nodding over a darting conspiratorial squint. His clothes were shabby, though they looked as if they had once been of good quality. His dark blue frock coat, probably proofed with overly wide sleeves, was edged with an even darker blue silk and lined with buff. His garment came down to his knees and covered everything but a pair of hard-worn, shin-collared boots. The man emitted a powerful foul odor, and altogether gave Rossamund a distinctly uneasy feeling. "And where might ye be from, young master?" this fellow asked, almost sweetly, his breath proving even fouler than his general stench. "To need to see such a fellow in such a vessel." "I be Rossamund Bookchild from Madame Oprah's estimable Marine Society for Foundling Boys and Girls, and here I thought I would get out of saying that, but apparently not. Rossamund gave a nervous half-bow. Rivermaster Vigilus is meant to take me to high vesting. This stranger might have been smelly, but that did not mean Rossamund had to be rude. The unsavory fellow seemed to hesitate at this, then gathered himself. "So you're me lively carver lad," he purred, giving a saucy wink. Very suspicious, but nonetheless, a bit unfortunate about your name, but there you have it. Still, grateful to have met you all the same. He bowed, removing his tricorn to show gray, greasy hair pulled back in a stubby baton. Patting his own chest, the captain continued, "I be Rivermaster Vigilus, your ever so humble servant." His comment on his name was certainly among the more blunt Rossamund had yet heard. Already low in his estimation, this Rivermaster Vigilus, sunk lower still. Obviously unconcerned, the Rivermaster plowed on. "I'll get you safe to your next arbor. I've plied this awful river for many a long year, and I know her bumps and lumps like the warts on my own rear." He declared this so loudly that many of his crew chuckled or sneered. "Thank you, lads." He was swaggering half-bow in the direction of the crew. "This is me crew, sons of a mad woman all." With a vague wave of his voluminously sleeved arm, he introduced the several dozen bargemen busy loading awkwardly large barrels marked "Swine's Lard" onto the hold. These fellows looked as rough and gruesome as their captain. Rossamund frowned at them and at the rusty vessel they worked. What was Mr. Sebastopol thinking? This thought would barely make it to the axles, let alone all the way to high vesting. The Rivermaster must have sensed his concerns, for he cleared his throat and said, "Aye, not the lithest tub you've seen, nor the handsomest crew, I'll grant. But there you have it. She be me other vessel, you see. Me standby, as I've heard it said. The poor old Punzel is laid up in ordinary with a great hole in her larboard side. Distressing, I tell you, and costly too. But there you have it again." The Rivermaster gave a sad sigh, and Rossamund felt a certain sympathy for him. When a vessel was laid up in ordinary, that is, deliberately stranded out of the water for repairs, it was often a troublesome business. "Instead, this be the 6-gun Cromster Hogshead," he continued. "She'll be our carriage to high vesting, and our quarters till we get there. She's steadier than she looks, and sound, and able to go into all waters. Fit enough to have made the voyage to high vesting and back again many times, and as sure as I am standing here." Despite all these claims, they did little to allay Rossamund's fears. He knew too much about how a vessel should be, a benefit of being raised in a marine society. He looked the hogshead up and down and spied the figurehead for the first time, protruding from the bow. It was of a snarling pig, so corroded and neglected that it looked as if it was rotting. He thought of the name Hogshead, which he knew was also the name for a large cumbersome barrel, profoundly fitting. A laborer rolled by them such a barrel, which emitted an odor so powerful and foul that it made Rossamund gag. Pullets and cockerels. I hope I don't have to spend my trip next to them, whatever they are. I was told my fare was already paid? The Rivermaster seemed to do a quick calculation, then said slowly, "Aye, master, young master, that it has." He gave Rossamund a quick grin. "Welcome aboard." He steered Rossamund up the gangplank and onto the befouled deck of the vessel. "I'll have to be about me business now. We'll make off shortly. Settle yourself out of the way. May your cruise be as pleasant as the spring caravan of the Geitland Queen." The Cromster shuddered. Its gastrons, the engines of living muscle that would quietly propel her through the water, were being limbered. stretched and warmed, ready for the hard work of turning the screw that pushed the hogshead along. Organic engines. Intriguing. Rossamund stood by the helm and waited with apprehension. He surely wished Master Sebastopol had accompanied him. Things seemed a little too odd. Ready to go, Poundinch, a sour-looking man called to the Rivermaster. Poundinch? Rossamund could not help but exclaim his thoughts. Aren't you Rivermaster Vigilus? Well, I am one and the same. The unsavory fellow rolled his eyes a little. He sucked in a breath. Then he said, Poundinch, just another way of saying Vigilus, you see? Different language, you see. Tutton, like the Empress herself speaks. Vigil is the same as pound, and eyeless is the same as inch. You see? The lad prefers the more comfortable sound of poundage, is all. They says it's so much I get in the habit of calling myself the same, too. And you can call me that as well, Rivermaster Poundinch. How'd that be? Rossamund squinted. He knew almost nothing of the Imperial language. Tutton, it was called. But something sounded a little off-beam. The musty Rivermaster raised an apparently conciliatory hand and gave a mildly wounded look. It's alright, I won't be offended. I often get people axing. 'Tis almost a habit for me to explain. Rossamund knew what it was to have a difficult name, to be misunderstood by it. He pressed the confusion no further. So, now we're all properly acquainted. Let's heave to. Mr. Rivermaster Poundinch or Vigilus, whoever he might be, smiled, then called, Cast her off, Mr. Pike, to his boatswain. Forgive me, I apparently cannot English right now. He relayed the order with another yell. The Rivermaster took up a speaking tube and hollered within. We'll have her at 2 knots, Mr. Shunt. The piermen threw ropes. The bargemen pushed off, and with further shuddering, the hogshead moved slowly out and steadily down the narrow channel. Rossamund quailed faintly with confusion, holding off in embarrassing blubbering panic. Away from the bank wall of sandstone they went. Away from the granite pier. Just like that, Rossamund was on his way, uncertain and unhappily alone with this frightful crew. The hogshead slowly trod past the shadow of another cromster on its right. That it was in much better repair was obvious even in the murk. Rossamund squinted and took a step forward to see if he might read the other vessel's nameplate, but was prevented by the fog and the bustling of the bargemen. Yet, just before the other cromster disappeared into the obscurity, he thought he saw someone pacing beside it on the pier, as if waiting for something or someone. He could not, however, be sure. Oh, he got on the wrong boat, didn't he? Yes, he went 4 instead of 5, so clearly these individuals are taking advantage. The hogshead moved on. The channel was one of the many man-made tributaries that had been dug from the main flow of the Humor many centuries ago, running into and out of the city, flowing down valleys of brickwork. Buildings often went right up. Buildings often went right up to the channel's edge, making the banks an almost continuous wall of drab bricks and dark stone in which streets and sludgy drains. Excuse me. Must have been something I ate. Forgive me. Let's see. Making the banks an almost continuous wall of drab bricks and dark stone in which streets and sludgy drains made deeply vertical gaps. Rossamund watched it all pass by in a silence of profound agitation. The Paterbeck stared, and its pier disappeared into the gloom. "Now, me lad," the Rivermaster's voice boomed, offending the quiet morning and startling Rossamund from its unhappy fun. "Do as I tells ye, and we'll be the best of mates, matey. So find yourself a spot on the prow and stay out of me way." The Foundling obeyed, sitting right at the front of the hogshead. The crew left him alone, free to fret on his future as they made their way out of Boschenberg. The Crumster passed beneath a heavy arch of black stone. The portcullis raised and dripping with condensed fog, and went from the dim gloom of the city channel into the pale murk of the open waters of the Humor. In the dark sepia waters before them was a lane marked with squat quartz pillars that glowed wanly in the vaporous morning. Rossamund had heard these were made using ancient and half-forgotten art, followed step by complex step, but little understood. The shadows of other vessels passed them by with faint thrumming hisses. Ships' bells clung to their warnings in the turgid damp. In the middle of the river, the hogshead came about and went southward, going downstream. The fog began to thin, showing the sun low in the east, a bulging blood-red disk. The Crumster continued south, moving past mountainous onyx places, past grand villas and dark, stately homes, past the wooden houses and low hovels, past even the Vlinderstraat and his old abode. Before them, athwart the hogshead's path, was a massive river gate that spanned the entire width of the Humor, the Axle. Tall it was, with pale granite turrets and many high arches held up by great columns and guarded by ponderous iron grills that descended right to the muddy bottom. Heavily fortified bastions towered by either side of each arch, and strong points filled with soldiers and 48-pounder long guns at every midpoint between. Over 500 years ago, the Axle had been built out of the city's second curtain wall to guard it from unwanted things on and in the river. All the traffic of the Humor had to pass through it, and to pass through it meant you paid a toll. Rossamund had seen the river gate several times before, though he had never passed through it, and it still amazed and daunted him. He knew very well that doing so for the first time was a deeply significant thing for a Boschenberger. It meant you were leaving the lulling, familiar security of your city, your home. It meant you were entering the broad, wild places where monsters harried and mishaps threatened. It meant your life changing forever. Rossamund stared at the Axle in awe. High above, musketeers in black and brown stood upon its solid battlements, vigilant wardens who strove to keep the city safe, whether from monsters or wicked men. The scarlet gleam of this eerie morning reflected from the bayonets and musket muzzles. Graceful pennants of sable and mole flicked and snapped higher still above them all. Such a mighty and well-defended wall. What Rossamund found even more spectacular was that there was another Axle, the twin of this one upstream, guarding Boschenberg's northern end. He felt a strange swell of pride for his city-state. With a deep, near-silent thudding, the hogshead slowed, the screws pushing back against the flow of the old river. One of the many great gates of the Axle loomed. Contrary to Rossamund's pessimism, the Crumster had managed to make it there without sinking. It pulled up alongside the enormous base of one of the great columns that fixed the whole river gate to the immemorial rock petrified beneath to the slime bed of the river. Part of the column's base was fashioned into a low, grimy wharf, and by this the hogshead halted to have its cargo inspected and pay the river toll. A door of pale, corroded green opened out onto the wharf, and from it marched several excise inspectors dressed in the familiar brown and black of Boschenberg. With a grin and a wink at Rossamund, Poundage stepped off the hogshead and held a conference with the most official-looking of all the inspectors. Rossamund sat at the prow of the monster, pretending not to listen, and listened intently to the conversation. Though he did not grasp all the baffling inconsistencies of adult ways, something about their communications suggested conspiracy. Such a pleasure to see you again, clerks, Sergeant Vorwind. Poundage touched the edge of his thrice eye. He handed over the manifest of his vessel's hold, and with it a little paper package. And a good early morning to you, Rivermaster Poundage. The official replied with a cynical grin. What is your cargo this time? He took the manifest and the little paper package with it, making as if to read the first while slyly pocketing the second. Poundage inclined his head, much the same as it always is. 70 barrels of exceptional swine's lard bound for the soap houses and wax factories of the Considine, my lord, and 10 bushels of parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme for the perfumes of Ives and Cassants. Not far south, in this old bucket. The clerk sergeant's eye raised an eyebrow. I may have to charge you an additional fee. How exceptional are we talking? Full and putridly ripe. Took a great deal of hard work to get it delivered, and just as much to load. Poundage smiled smugly. And the young master by the tiller, he's not one of your deliveries, is he? Rosamund's spine tingled as he realized the clerk's sergeant was talking about him. Oh, no. I've taken on a cabin boy, see? Fetching carry and such. Someone to learn the ropes and take up the trade as you like. He's well appraised of the arrangements, never you mind. Cabin boy? Fetch and carry? Rossamund held his breath. Was this all double talk? Why did Rivermaster Poundage not just speak the truth? Does he not know that I can hear him? Clerk Sergeant Vorwind frowned. As it should be, Poundage. We both know what happened last time you took on a cabin lad. This new fellow will most certainly incur another toll. He lowered his voice so that Rossamund had difficulty hearing what he said next. Be warned. The Emperor has issued an edict expanding the bans on the dark trades. We won't trouble ourselves with it now, but the next time you're through, be expecting to pay an even higher fine. Dark trades? Black market, I'm assuming? Now it was Poundage's turn to frown. As you like it, Vorwind, he said through gritted teeth. Don't push us too hard, mind, or we might have to push back. Careful, Poundage. The clerk's sergeant snarled quietly. 'Twould be an easy thing for me to reverse things as they stand. If you force me, I'll push right back again. With the authority of our beloved city-state. He took a step backward, his expression changing easily from open hostility to formal approval. Very good, Rivermaster. We'll complete our inspection, then you may go on your way. Muttering imprecations into his creased neckerchief, Poundage stepped back onto the hogshead and waited there by the column's base for the clerks to finish their duty. Rossamund was certainly ignorant of much in the conversation's true meaning, but his suspicions still churned. What were the dark trades that Vorwind fellow had hinted at? He found it hard to understand how it was that a man like Sebastopol, punctual officious, had, it seemed, got him a berth upon a vessel of such poor conduct. Except that you're on the wrong ship, Rossamund, but semantics. While the Rivermaster and Clerk Sergeant had been in conference, sturdy men had been looking the hogshead over. They descended the waste ladder into the hold, quickly reappearing with disgusted expressions on their faces, to scrutinize the bargeman's papers. Eventually, a hefty, bespectacled clerk demanded to see Rosamund's own traveling certificates. The clerk looked very much as if he knew what to do should any document not meet his precise requirements. Rosamund stared up at him as he handed over his papers. It was like looking up at a solid brick wall. With a cursory scan, the clerk returned his papers without a comment. Fees paid and cargo and crew declared fit, the hogshead head was permitted to pass. The grill before them squealed and slowly moved aside. The vessel trod through cautiously. Once clear of the mighty axle, it gathered speed and proceeded downriver, passing the third curtain wall of Boschenberg, then the outer curtain wall and the suburbs fenced in between. Beyond that, farmlands and immaculately tilled and primarily fenced stretched away on both sides. Gorgeously white egrets stalked in crimson-legged water hens waddled about the banks among the sodden roots and fallen russet leaves of tall sycamores, graceful elms, and black evergreen turpentines. Rossamund stayed at his post right at the tip of the bow, where he read his instructions and his beloved almanac, and tried his best to avoid the crew, none of whom was proving very friendly. The instructions were brief and simple. He was to remain aboard the vessel till he reached high vesting, and once disembarked, was to meet with a certain Mr. Germanicus in the offices of the chief harbor governor. From there, Mr. Germanicus was to assist the boy to Winstermill, the lamplighter's mains, or headquarters, where he would receive further instructions. At the bottom was a strange mark, Seb, ending in a line with a squiggle, which he assumed was Sebastopol's mark. That was all of it. Rossamund read them over and over to see if he might have missed anything, hoping fervently that this mysterious Mr. Germanicus would know how to find him, for he had no idea how he could find Mr. Germanicus. Gleaning little, he sat back, leaning on a pile of hessian and hemp rope, fretting. From this position, he could keep a close eye on the suspect crew, this Poundinch fellow most of all, and even be on the watch for monsters, though he did not know what he would do if he found one. He still wanted to know if it was coming. Occasionally, he consulted his almanac. The map showed that the humor wending its way through many miles of apparently featureless regions, places the topographers had not bothered to name. They had marked instead in large blank areas on either side of the river simple descriptions: broad pasture land on the east side, and a great partial wilderness on the west. They had also marked the humor with its other names in parentheses: Humor, Svartgalig, Sentinus, names given by other races in other times. Only two places were noted along its course ahead of them. The first was Proud Sulking, a city like Boschenberg, of which he had some idea. The other was somewhere called the Spindle, positioned just before the humor emptied into a large body of water to the south called the Groom. This was the enormous bay upon whose shores were noted many other cities and many other ports. He knew something about the Groom too, but what was the Spindle? He rose and cautiously went to Rivermaster Poundinch to ask him. "Been reading the charts, I see," Poundinch observed amiably. "Gets the feeling, with all your gawping at the axle, that you tain't been out the city for, am I right?" "Only once, to visit the sister of a friend. She lives in Blemish, which is a tiny village just outside the walls." These had been most magical visits to the small cottage of Roline's younger sister, and Rossamund could not remember more wonderful times. He sighed. How he was going to miss Roline. He was determined to scratch down a letter to her when he arrived in Winster Mill. Sounds quaint, lad. As for the spindle, well, it's another further Rivergate, just as menacing as those axles there. The Rivermaster poked a thumb over his shoulder at the dark, shadowy line of the Rivergate they left behind. But it belongs to a different city, that being Brandenbrass, which is my home, by the way. Spindle's about 3 days from here, and after that, I'll take us out into the Groom. We then turn left and travel east to High Vesting. All up, you'll be with us for a little under a week. He looked sidelong at Rossamund. Been on a coaster before, lad? Because if you like, when we'll clear the morning's fog, I can show you about the humble dimensions of my own vessel. Despite his strong stink and original gruffness, Rivermaster Poundage now seemed a very friendly fellow, as pleasant as Rossamund could have hoped for. Aye, a few times, sir, though I've not actually been on many crafts, sir. Of all the fascinating things about water-going craft, Rossamund was fascinated by gas strines. These were large boxes in the bowels of ironclads housing great muscles that turned the vessel's screw, or propeller, and their limbers, which were smaller versions of a gas strine that were used to warm up the grater. Without limbers, the muscles of a gas strine would soon tear and bruise and seize up. Could I see the gas strines, sir? I've been told they have to be looked out every hour or they get sick. And who told you that? Rosamund's child lifted as he proudly answered. Dormitory Master and ex-gunner Frantatot, one of the masters of the Marine Society. Rossamund liked to use his Dormitory Master's full title, but he almost never had an opportunity. Frantatot, eh? Poundage frowned long and plucked some rogue hairs on his patchily shaven chin. I reckon I remember him. A terrifying fellow, if my memory serves. Knew how to get us to shoot straight, that's for sure. Well, you were told right, my lad, and I'd expect no less from Frantatot. You knew Master Frantatot? Rossamund was agog at this. What was he like? Did you serve at the Battle of the Mole with him? Aye. The Rossamund Poundage chuckled. Only briefly, not nearly so long to know him well, but long enough to get a feel for him. And the switch of his rod. He muttered his last bit into his neckerchief, but the Foundling heard it anyway. Didn't you like him, sir? Aye. Old Poundage likes everyone. I find it's more as a matter of who likes old Poundy. Frantatot was as fine a petty officer as a navy or the ladies could ever want. Ladies? Rossamund had sometimes wondered if there had ever been a good lady Frantatot. Was he married, sir? Poundage guffawed. Oh, no, there was no wife that I knew of. You weren't like the marrying kind to me. Now, that's enough on him, lad. Let me concentrate on the steering for a bit, and then we'll take you to have a peep at them there gas strines. Remaining by the Rivermaster, Rossamund tried to imagine Frantatot playing his old trade with noble vigor and cavorting with the refined ladies of lofty and fashionable courts. How strange it would have been to see him pacing the decks of some great ram, bellowing orders stoutly amid the smoke and terror of a sea battle. The kind of sea battle that Rossamund was never going to get the chance to see. He had his new trade far inland. He thought again about Sebastopol's two brief instructions. Rivermaster Poundage. Aye, lad. Poundage looked down at him. Would you know where the Rossamund frowned as he read aloud from the instructions. The offices of the Chief Harbor Governor are... I gather you're meaning in high vesting. Aye, sir. Well, most certainly I do. Need to be shown him when we get there, do you? Old Pounding can do that for you in a trice. Gratified and relieved, Rossamund doffed his hat and bowed to the Rivermaster, as he had seen men in the streets do, and said earnestly, I am most obliged to you, sir. Pounding burst with powerful laughter, sweeping off his own hat and returning the formality. Why, 'tain't nothing, me good sir. The hogshead proved more solid than she had first appeared, pushing sturdily through many of the submerged snags that hindered their progress. Rossamund was informed that the 50-odd crew slept on the upper deck, right down the middle of the vessel, between the guns, and as there was no room in the hold, he would be expected to do the same. He did not mind, for the hold was more cramped than the Marine Society, and stunk horribly of pig, sweat, and other worse unnameable things. There were no cabins on a flat, flush upper deck, except for the holdway about halfway down the vessel, a low box-like structure with doors which opened onto the ladder that descended into the hold. There were also the 12 bull-black 12-pounder cannons that in staggering rows on either side, and taking up a goodly amount of room. 6 cannons were in a line on the steerboard or right side, and 6 down the ladeboard or left side of the vessel. Rossamund admired them. Despite his anxieties, he found that he was actually excited to be on his first real voyage. The movement of the chromster in the water, the bustle of activity, and the routine of the watches, the silent throbbing of the gas strings. The hogshead was no ocean-going ironclad, yet it was much more thrilling than the small craft on which Rossamund had made day trips in the past. In map-reading classes back at the Foundlingery, he had been taught about the oceans, the vinegar seas. He had been taught that they were a rainbow of different colors, reds, greens, azures, yellows, and black, shown on the charts as the Pontus Nubia. These lessons made him long to see the sea. Now that he was almost upon such waters, he sorely regretted that an ocean-going life was not to be his. By the third bell of the middle watch, the fog had lifted sufficiently for Poundinch to trust the course of the hogshead to Mr. Pike, and make good on his offer to show Rossamund the gastrons. Gastrons, I think. The ladder creaked frightfully as the Rivermaster led him down into the hold. It was painfully cramped below deck. Poundinch stooped low, and even lower to pass beneath beams. The stench of the place made Rosamund's eyes water. He never thought anything could be so putrid, so foul. He was determined to make a brave showing, however, and pressed on. The Rivermaster did not seem to mind or even notice. Poundinch waved vaguely to the forward parts, where the barrels were lashed and obscured with canvas tarpaulins. No need to be showing you that. Just feel the old swine's lard. It's aft you wants to be. Follow me, lad, and see all the wonders of this beauty's gastrons. Rossamund followed, and there they were, the gastrons. His sense of disappointment was much the same as when he had spied Sebastopol's Thenacon box, as that device was just a small ordinary box, so these gastrons were just very large ordinary wooden boxes bound with copper. But at least these were big. He almost reached the planking of the deck above. Running down either side of them were much smaller boxes of hardwood, 2 for each side of the gastron. These were the limbers. From the top of each rose great cranks and several many jointed shafts that pivoted perpendicularly and entered the side of the gastroid. They were still now, the limbers not being in use. With such a crowd of machinery, there was barely enough room to press along the grimy curving inner walls of the hold to pass. Rossamund was amazed at the steady pulsating of the muscles within the gastroids. He could sense it in the air all about as they squeezed past. Feel it powerfully in the planks and the beams beneath his feet and at his back. What surprised him most was the warmth that came from the great brass-bound boxes, a sickly heat which made the rotten air of the hold thick and clinging. In a cramped space at the stern, they met a wizened man in an apron surrounded by a complicated array of levers, his long, thin white hair dripping in humidity. He looked up at the Rivermaster with silent, surly questioning eyes. With a silent, surly question in his eyes. Forgive me. Poundage introduced him to Rossamund as Master Shunt, the Gastroneer. It was the Gastroneer's task to feed, muck out, and care for the gastroids. Make sure they were always limbered properly and keep them in good health. He ranked highly in a vessel's crew. Hello, Master Shunt, sir, said the Foundling. Shunt, the Gastroneer, ignored him. Oh, there you are. Poundage patted the nearest box. These be gastroids. Not much to look at, eh? But a powerful sight more constant than a sailing vessel. And no mistake, I'll leave you to deal with old Shunt here so he can talk technicalities with you. Come straight up when you're done, mind. No dalliance is done. About done here. Forgive me, I'm going to pause real quick, grab a drink. This constant reading is grating on my throat. Okay, I am back. So, back to where I left off. The Rivermaster retreated. Rossamund carefully pressed a hand against the gastry. It was most certainly hot, the brow of someone in a fever. The mighty throbbing of the muscles working within transmitted up his arm, and he felt his whole body bump thump in sympathy. He admired the powerful looking levers, many of which were half as tall as him again, each one governing certain actions of the gastroids and limbers. He looked to the Gastroneer with a smile. Git! Cursed Shunt. Sorry, Master Shunt, sir, Rossamund pulled his hand away from the side of the box. The Gastroneer rolled his eyes horribly. Git! He grated again, stabbing a hand at the Foundling. Rossamund blinked in surprise, then realized with horror that there was a weapon in the man's hand. A curved and cruelly barbed dagger. He had never been threatened with a real weapon before. It was enough to send him stumbling back up the ladder and running back to his couch of canvas at the bow. Forgive me. I see you've got yourself well acquainted with our darling Gastroneer. Chuckled Poundage as Rossamund fled past him. Rossamund refused to do anything so embarrassing as cry, though he very much felt like it, and might have once. At that moment, hugging his knees to his chest and scowling back any tears, he would rather have been back in the Foundlingery's suffocating halls. With the dark of his first night on board descending, Rossamund decided to sleep at his original station at the prow on a pile of old Hessian and hemp, distinct only from the other piles of old Hessian and hemp as stinking less. No one objected, and so he settled in for sleep. If it rained, he would rather get wet than endure the disgusting hold. The night passed mercifully dry, yet dreams of a knife-wielding Shunt The incessant clang of the watch bells and the stomping of the crew's bare feet kept Rossamund from restful sleep. By the ringing of the morning watch at around 4 o'clock, he gave up on the prospect of proper rest and was rewarded eventually with a beautiful, brilliant pink sunrise. Red dawning, traveler's warning, he thought gloomily. The Hogshead was now clear of Bolschenberg and its jurisdiction, and roaming an ungoverned stretch of the Humor. The land on the eastern side of the river remained flat, open pasture land. Upon the west, it was becoming more rolling and rocky, and decidedly more wild-looking. Such places were known as ditchlands, the borders between every man's kingdom and the dominion of the monsters. Rossamund could well imagine Boggles and Knickers prowling through the stunted trees and ragged weeds, seeing who they might devour. As the day progressed, Rivermaster Poundage ignored everyone and contributed little to the running of the vessel. Occasionally he would growl like a man, but usually he lounged silently at the tiller, his chin in his chest as if he was dozing. Rossamund was taken by the loneliness. At that moment, alone among all these self-interested cutthroats, he would have welcomed even Mr. Sebastopol's stiff manners and disturbing eyes. Poundage came alive suddenly at the end of the forenoon watch, and the beginning of the afternoon when dinner was served by the taciturn, sour-faced cook, and again when there was gunnery practice. Early in the afternoon watch, when the river seemed clear of other crafts, he roused himself and bellowed, "Right, lads, gunnery practice, to your pieces." A boatswain's whistle was blown, and the crew hustled to the 6 cannon on the laidboard side of the hogshead. Forgive me, I appear to be stumbling with my words. I'm not entirely sure why. Poundage strutted at the helm post, bellowing orders, directions, abuse. "Run him out, you mucky scoundrels! Come on, Weezin, I've seen me grandmama rest her. Move faster than ye. She's been a moulder in the ground these last 10 years. And I should know. I put her there myself." At this, he gave a blood-curdling chortle, and many of the crew joined in. Rossamund chuckled nervously with them, eagerly awaiting what he hoped would be a spectacle. He had always wanted to see the cannon worked. The foundlings of Madame Opers had never been allowed near one, regardless of their training in the naval crafts. Suddenly, he realized that there were benefits in leaving the foundlingery and its strict policies afterward. Boom! One after the other, the pieces were fired. At a rotten stump or anything that happened to be passing by. The smaller the better, to improve the bargeman's aim. For Rossamund, it was indeed both thrilling and deafening, and completely distracting him from his anxious woes. Boom went the guns once more, and the crash of their firing hitting him with a thump right in his chest. Each blast filling the air with creamy, fizzy-smelling smoke that billowed and lazily drifted away. The whole vessel shuddered with each cannonade, while across the other side of the Humor, great vertical splashes were thrown up, or part of a tree would collapse, sending cattle fleeing from the riverbank. After the 4th broadside, the crew were piped to cease and routine resumed. Rivermaster Poundage went back to his languor, and Rossamund remained alone in the bow, humming with a boyish joy at what had proved a spectacle indeed. That evening was clear and bitterly cold. A 3/4 moon was rising, swollen and yellow in the dark green sky. Muffled by his scarf, his jet coat buckled right up, Rossamund lay belly down on the deck of the bow and stared at the black water. For some time, he had been listening to the loud concert of 1,000 frogs all singing along the banks, and watching a small pale shape dashing upon the water's surface. At first, he thought it was a weak reflection of lunar light playing on the bow wave, but as 2 bells of the second dog watch rang, it moved oddly, darting out from the vessel, then back again. The hairs on Rossamund's neck bristled, and a shimmer of terror thrilled through his belly. He stared as the pale shape broke the surface. It was a head, a pallid lump, unclear in the jaundiced light, showing a long snout full of snaggle-jawed teeth. Its glittering black eyes rolled evilly and fixed him with a terrible gaze. His first monster. Rossamund had enough wit to grope for his satchel, which he never kept far from him. Perhaps now was the time to use one of his precious repellents. Just as he gripped the strap, the pale lump of water gave a long bubbling snort and disappeared under the bow and away to the right, toward moon shadows and a root-tangled bank. Rossamund shook with fear. He did not move for a long time, but just lay staring at the right bank, trying to blink as little as possible for fear that the pale beast would spring upon him in ambush from the water. His horror was heightened when a gurgling howl rang in the dark. For Rossamund, it was pure terror. I apparently cannot read still. Among the crew, however, it caused but a minor stir and nothing more. For the second night, curled up tight in pungent Hessian, Rossamund got little sleep. That was a bit of a lengthy one. I think the chapters are probably just going to get longer from here, so I'm half tempted to split them in half, but we'll see what happens. In the meantime, I thank you all for joining me for this series. If you enjoyed it, feel free to leave a like and a comment down below. Any thoughts you might have on this story so far. And also make sure to share the video around. Your views do help this channel grow and brings everyone here one step closer to doing this full time, not having to have this as a side thing due to work getting in the way. In the meantime, make sure to also subscribe to the channel and ring the notification bell to be alerted whenever a new video goes live, or if Darkus himself goes live. Actually, the video goes live. I mean, forgive me, my brain is getting all scrambled today for some reason. But subscribe and ring the notification bell for whenever new videos are uploaded, as well as when Darkus goes live. In the meantime, my screwy, sleep-addled brain, probably at least, aside, I will see you all in the next video. I am Gresham's et al., and I do hope you have a pleasant day.